Do you remember your first real guitar? And I don't mean a super expensive custom shop or even a guitar good enough to gig with, but the first one that didn't come from a toy store. If you had the chance to own it again, would you? Maybe it's not the exact guitar, but that model, that brand, that color, for no other than sentimental reasons. If you had a chance to make it yours again, would you? Regardless the cost? Well, I almost spent $2,000 on a Fender Squier 2, a guitar that you can get online right now for about $300, and that originally cost half that much. And I almost spent that money because my childhood was a lie. I'm Thom Tran, and this is the story behind the strings. My dad bought me my first guitar when I was a toddler, this Bee Gees painted nylon strung toy guitar. And then he bought me my first real guitar. When I graduated from the 8th grade, it was his, hey, you made it to high school. I didn't see this happening. Congrats on surprising the whole family gift. He wrote that on the card. Regardless of my dad's weird way of telling me he was proud of me, the old man was a big influence in my life. He's the reason I love hockey, he's the reason I joined the military, and he's the reason I play Fender Strats. Because the first real guitar he bought me was a candy apple red Fender Contemporary Stratocaster. Here I am with it, backstage in high school. I grew up in the 80s, so I love Eddie Van Halen, dive bombs, skin-tight leather pants, all that jazz. And because it was the 80s, the Fender Contemporary Stratocasters were meant to bring the heavy metal feel of the decade to the traditional rock stylings of the Stratocaster. As it said in one of Fender's product catalogs, they were for the metalists, by the metalists. Everyone from Paul Gilbert to Vivian Campbell was playing some kind of super strat, and Fender wanted in on that action. And the contemporary Strats came in a wide variety of configurations. Some had 2 single coils and a humbucker, others had 2 humbuckers and no single coil, some had a pickguard, others didn't. Some had Fender Shaler style tremolos, and they came in a huge range of colors from all black to Olympic white to a traditional burst and almost everything in between. It was the 80s, anything goes. But here are the specs on mine. It was made in Japan, candy apple red, 22 medium jumbo frets, a C-shaped neck with a 12-inch radius, maple fingerboard, Kahler spider with a Y, tremolo, 3 single coil pickups, and a 25.5-inch scale. But somewhere between joining the Army and moving to Los Angeles to become a stand-up comic, I sold that guitar. And I wish I hadn't, because my dad bought it for me, and my dad is a big reason that I did most things in my life. Well, him and Prince, like Raspberry Beret Prince. But if anything, that guitar is a symbol of my relationship with my dad. So after I'd collected most of the bucket list guitars that I've always lusted after, I decided to find this first guitar. And after years of eBay wars, guitar shows, and dumb luck, I found this candy apple red, late 80s, early 90s contemporary Fender Strat with a Kahler spider, with a Y, locking tremolo, 3 single coils and a maple neck just like from the photos in high school. And I found it on Reverb in France for about $1,500, plus import fees and shipping fees. So the question is, am I willing to drop $2 grand on a piece of my childhood? Because I've already got a Fender Strat, a few of them, actually. Also, now that I'm older, I have a love-hate relationship with Floyd Rose and Kahler style tremolos. I love them, I just hate tuning them and setting them up and even thinking about tuning them or setting them up. Now, if this was pre-2020 times, and you know I hadn't stopped working for essentially 2 years, I would have snatched this up without thinking twice. But again, with age comes wisdom and a withering hairline, and that hair growth stuff on the internet ain't cheap. Hey Keeps, holler at your boy. So I put the brakes on this particular purchase in hopes that it would still be available after I got a few more residual checks or until I can prove that I am in fact related to David Tran, the guy who invented Sriracha. Now it's becoming clear in courtrooms and in the legal community that human memories can be fallible. We think we remember something clearly. We remember being in a place or holding a thing in our hands, but it turns out it was actually an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation that we're thinking about, and we weren't actually on Rigel 7 playing Hide the Ressican Flute with some Orion slave girls. My God, I'm a nerd. What's any of that have to do with my first guitar? I mean, I have photos of me holding it in high school. I have photos with it in my first apartment after joining the Army. So what am I getting wrong? Well, remember how I hit pause on that purchase? Well, thank Eddie Van Halen that I did, because fast forward a few months while I was looking for some old photos of my friends in grade school, and I found these photos of my bedroom at my dad's house from when I was a teenager. And that is not the candy apple red Fender Contemporary Strat that I'm holding in all those photos. What that is a Torino red Fender Squier 2 Strat next to what I assume is my older brother's Super Strat style guitar. And when I saw these photos, a lot of things started to make sense, like I always wondered how I talked my dad into spending what is the equivalent of nearly $1,500 in today's money on that Super Strat. The answer is, I didn't. When I saw this photo, it knocked a few things loose up here, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, he got me this little Squire 2, not that Super Strat. It was a few years later, after I'd saved up all my money from working my first job as a dishwasher, to buy myself that contemporary Strat. So now what? Should I go try to find that made in Korea Squire 2? Well, yes, of course. Guess what? I found it. Also on Reverb, but this time, not in Europe. And here it is. So let's unbox this little guy and give it a whirl. While I unbox it, here are the specs on this little shredder. These Squire 2s were made in Korea from 1988 to 1989, and then manufactured in India between 1990 and 1991. And there are some minor differences, but let's start with the similarities. They both have 3 single coil pickups, top-mounted input jack, a vintage-style bridge, master volume and 2-tone knobs, 5-way pickup selector switch, maple neck with a rosewood or maple fingerboard, 12-inch neck radius with 21 frets, 25.5-inch scale, and they came in black, frost white, or Torino red. And now for the differences. The Korean model has a 1-ply pickguard, while the Indian model has a 3-ply. The Indian model also comes with CBS-style saddles, while the Korean version has die-cast block saddles. The Korean model also has its truss rod adjustment at the headstock, while the Indian model has it in the neck heel. And the Korean model also has a silver Squire logo and a white plastic nut, while the Indian-made model has a gold Squire logo and black plastic nut. And now that it's unboxed, let's give it a go. All right, you get cool points if you can tell me the 3 riffs I just played, the name of the band, and the album. I'll give you a hint, same band, same album, released in 1992, which is about the year that my dad bought me the original Fender Squire 2. And if you can name it, I'll give you some cool swag. How about that? Just leave the answer in the comments below. Even if you don't know the answer, just leave something below. So let's start with this. This is what I remember of this guitar. I remember that if you looked at the tuning pegs wrong, they would go out of tune. And I am pleasantly surprised that this isn't nearly as bad as I remember. The pots were a little scratchy. They were a wee dirty when I took it out of the box. Nothing little TLC couldn't take care of. The pickups, however, this bridge pickup, very hot. I mean, they sound like the pickups you would get on a $300 Squire from the 80s. But other than that, it's a little shredder, man. I dig it. You know, and I'm sure 13-year-old Thom loved the crap out of this thing in high school. I'm sure 13-year-old Thom probably also took some paint and tape to this, a la Eddie Van Halen. But other than that, it's a little wrecker, man. I dig it. For 300 bucks, I think it was a good get. And I hear the new Fender Squire Classic Vibe Strats sound just as good, if not better. So if you can, grab one. And that's it. That's how I almost spent $2,000 on a made in Korea Fender Squire 2 Stratocaster from the late 80s. Luckily I didn't, and I was able to get this guitar for a price that's much more easily digested. About 300 bucks for what is essentially just a reminder of my dad. But to be honest, that would have been worth any price. But thank Jim Marshall, it didn't have to be. There it is, my first episode of the story behind the strings. I hope you liked it. What was your first guitar? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be making my way through my collection, including some of the guitars hanging up in the back and the ones I play on stage, either with my band, The Bridge Crew, or solo doing stand-up comedy. If you like the video, please subscribe to the page, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any upcoming videos. And if there's a guitar you want me to go behind the strings of, leave it in the comments below, even if it's not in my collection. Please follow me on all the places, including Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can help support the channel at Patreon, where you can suggest a guitar for me to go behind the strings of, even if I don't own it. Links are below. And of course, my stand-up comedy dates are all on my website, thomtran.com. Thanks again, and let the strings tell your story.